Craigenmore, Oban, Talisker, and Lagavulin. Let's rank these distillers' editions. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're finishing up this little mini-series I have from the virtual tasting I did through Kensington Wine Market, where we compared the flagship versions of these distilleries against their distiller edition siblings. And so today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to provide some final thoughts on these 4 distillers editions, as well as give them a ranking from 1 to 4. So first off, should probably introduce, I've got the Craigenmore 2022 Distillers Edition. I've got the Oban 2022 Distillers Edition, the Talisker 2022 Distillers Edition, and the Lagavulin 2022 Distillers Edition. And the reason why I'm specifying 2022 so much is because the first point I want to make is these are no longer vintage releases. They've removed the vintages off these bottlings, which is really frustrating because I really loved that part of these releases. It actually tied these releases to a particular year. You could say, hey, that's a 2011 Talisker. Hey, that's a 2006 Lagavulin or something like that. If that math checks out, yeah, the 2022 would have been a 2006. Sadly, we can't do that. And what I'm talking about, just to actually demonstrate it, I've got this is the only Distillers Edition I know. I got a Talisker Distillers Edition. This is a 2009 vintage, bottled in 2019. But you might be able to see it has the years on there, 2009, 2019. So again, like, say if there was a special event that happened for me in 2009, I'd be able to tie that to it. And it's a nice whiskey nerdum, cool thing to be able to do. So you can't do that anymore. So I'm disappointed in that, Diageo. Next, I want to point out something that everybody on this virtual tasting noticed right away. And as soon as I was setting up for it, I was like, oh my goodness. All these whiskeys are basically identical in color, even though they've all gone through a different type of sherry finishing or extra maturation. Sometimes they word it. I think they're actually all just finishes. They're all the same color, and so yeah, they're consistent. But they're consistently putting E150A caramel colorant into each of these whiskeys. I'd love to actually have the natural colors, so we can be like, oh, that looks like it was a super active cask, or oh, that could have been a wet cask, or oh yeah, this might not be so heavy-handed because it's lighter in color. I'd like to be able to actually like look at the whiskey and try to determine something from the color instead of just being presented with the same copper goldish hue in every single one of them. And the flagships were almost identical in color too. So again, that's kind of disappointing. And it's just an observation. Of the ones that were in this tasting, 3 of them actually are worm tub distilleries, which is pretty cool. And I'm a big fan of worm tubs as I'm trying more and more distillate that comes from worm tub distilleries. And I just think it gives that extra heft, that extra weight to that spirit to really pick it up and make it really stand out. And so I think that's really important, especially with the Craigenmore and the Oban. I just think when they're bottled at 40 or 43%, it really helps lift those whiskeys a little bit more to make them a bit more enjoyable. The additional ABV, the additional alcohol on the Talisker at 45.8% is huge too. It also gives it a bit more weight, a bit more power, a bit more flavor delivery from that alcohol content. So that's super important as well. That's one of the reasons why my favorite in the past, my favorite has been the Talisker Distillers Edition. That's why I have a bottle of it on my bar. It's because I really appreciate that one. I just think it's the one that's done probably the best in the past. All that said, I should probably get around to what you're probably here for, which is the ranking of from first to fourth, however you want to say it, of these whiskeys. And so for me, 4th place was the Craigenmore 2022. That's the Port Pipes Distillers Edition. I just felt that it was all finish. It was all just like chocolate and some raspberries. It covered up that Craigenmore spirit far too much, and the regular Craigenmore 12-year-old was just a better whiskey for me. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's not a bad whiskey. However, if I'm spending my money, it's likely not going to be on the Craigmore Distillers Edition 2022. Third place for me was the Oban 14-year-old, not 14-year-old, sorry, Oban Distillers Edition 2022. And that's just because, again, I felt like the flagship version did it better. I felt like this was an interesting spin on that flagship 14-year-old, but didn't really provide a more enjoyable experience. And also, there's some preconceived palate preferences that I have. I like a bit more peat. I'm definitely someone who likes a bit more of smoke to my whiskey. So I'm already going to be biased towards the Lagavulin and the Talisker. But again, just trying to be a bit more objective, I don't think the Distiller's Edition provided as good of an experience as the straight up Oban 14-year-old. Third place for me was the Lagavulin Distiller's Edition 2022. And I went that direction because I feel that it was an interesting take. It was jammy, that like fig spread, that like a jam marmalade sort of thing was great. But again, I don't think it had quite the same depth as the 16-year-old. And I think that I just enjoyed the 16-year-old a bit more than the Distiller's Edition. It was a really interesting take. It's super enjoyable. If you're a fan of Lagavulin 16, I think you're gonna have to pick up a bottle of the Distiller's Edition, because when you want to have something different, it's a great way to go. For every 2 drams of Lagavulin 16 you have, maybe make the third one the Distiller's Edition to keep your palate fresh, to refresh it, keep it guessing a bit. My winner of this experiment, of this tasting, of these head-to-heads, was the Talisker Distillers Edition 2022. I kind of let it slip early when I said how much I loved the Distillers Edition in the past, and the fact that it's the only one I own previous editions of. I just think that extra ABV really carries it through. I'm a big fan of moderately peated whiskeys, and I think that this type of finish, this Amoroso sherry finish, it just wasn't heavy-handed. It complemented the Talisker spirit as opposed to covering it, taking over, and that way it was just, it added an extra dimension without taking away. So the Talisker Distillers Edition was my favorite. It was actually closer than I thought it would be with the Lagavulin, but the Talisker takes it. Some other final closing thoughts, because obviously there was other whiskeys in this, and I'm gonna read the rankings to keep them straight because I don't have them in front of me right now. But for the flagship brands, for the Craigmore 12, the Talisker 10, the Lagavulin 16, and the Oban 14, of those flagships, my preferences were the Craigmore 12 was 4th, Oban 14 was 3rd. Again, my preference towards peat is showing. Talisker 10 was 2nd, and the Lagavulin 16 came home with the 1st place of those flagships. And if I had to blend it all up and give you a preference, it's tough to keep straight, but work with me here. 8th place was Craigmore Distillers Edition. 7th was Oban Distillers Edition. 6th was Craigmore 12. 5th was Oban 14, because I have a really soft spot for that whiskey. I love Oban 14. It's a bottle I probably should replace and get back on my bar. 4th place was Lagavulin Distillers Edition. 3rd was the standard Talisker 10. 2nd was Lagavulin 16. And my favorite out of flagship and Distillers Edition all thrown in together was the Talisker Distillers Edition 2022. I really enjoy this whiskey. It's a great take, and I think, again, it's complementary. It adds something to it without taking away, and for that reason, I think it's the one that is carried out the best. Thank you once again, guys, for tuning in. I guess this could have done as like a Patreon sort of style video, bonus content, all that, but I felt it was a nice way to neatly wrap up this little mini series of first impression sessions. Thank you for joining me on this. I think these Distillers Edition, what they're perfect for is they're perfect for someone who already loves that original whiskey, that already loves Open 14 and just needs something different. Already owns a Lagavulin 16 and needs something different. So my question for you is going to be, have you had these Distillers editions? Which one is your favorite? Or which one of these would be the first one you would want to try? There are other Distillers editions that I left off because they weren't in the virtual tasting. So there's 3 more from Kalila, Dalwhinnie, and Glenkinchie that are out there to explore too. Maybe in the future I'll be able to bring you some thoughts on those. Thank you once again for joining me on the West Coast, guys. I really appreciate if you can like, share, subscribe. It really helps. I'm loving all the interaction, and I'm loving all these whiskeys. Until next time, guys, from the West Coast, Slange.